My son's fiance mocked me when we met for the first time. Your dad only finished middle school? Seriously? Can you even get a job with such a low academic qualification? She laughed heartily. Her father chimed in. I can't believe he's an unemployed high school dropout, and belittled me. On top of that, they served food only for the four of them, excluding me. The fiance's mother said with a big smile, I prepare meals only for my family. I have never seen someone ridicule a parent to this extent during a meet and greet between two families. I decided to get back at the four rude people, including my son, and told them, say whatever you want, before storming out of the restaurant. My name is Stephen Walker. I just turned 60 this year, and I have a 25-year-old son named Michael. But my relationship with my son is strained, and he never sets foot in my house. I've often regretted how I raised him, as this is what led to the situation we're in now. I lost my beloved wife when Michael was still in elementary school. My wife had been frail since childhood, and she passed away at the young age of 45. At my wife's funeral, I didn't care about the judgmental looks from relatives. I bawled like a little kid. Michael was more composed, telling me, Dad, it's sad, but let's say our goodbyes to Mom. But my grief only lasted during the funeral. Back then, I was running a real estate business that I had inherited from my father. The day after my wife's funeral, I woke up to phone calls from clients. That's right, I had loyal clients to take care of, and I had to raise Michael on my own now. I snapped out of it with those phone calls and headed to my office. At the same time, I took part in school events and PTA meetings. I had to fill a role that my wife had been playing all by myself. There's no way my lousy self could juggle work and school events perfectly on my own. I quickly gave up and decided to temporarily close my business. I handed over my clients to another real estate agency so I could spend time with Michael. But when I went to his school, Michael glared at me and said, Dad, I told you not to come. He even complained, Don't tell anyone you're my dad. Without saying whose parent I was or why I was at the school, I would just be some stranger. Even today, I'm wearing a name tag that says Walker as I participate in PTA activities. I couldn't fathom why my son started giving me the cold shoulder all of a sudden, but it didn't take long for the penny to drop. Hey, isn't that your dad? What's he doing at school on a weekday? Does he have nothing better to do? My mom said that after your mom passed away, your dad became jobless, right? Michael remained silent and looked down as his classmates taunted him. I quickly rushed over and told them, I'm just taking some time off work. It's like your summer or winter break. However, seizing this opportunity, my son was further ridiculed by his classmates. Your dad's just jobless pretending to be on break. Your family's poor. I'll share my bread from lunch with you. Darn you, Dad, your speaking to me just made me look even worse. Michael grew more and more resentful as his classmates made fun of him. Despite knowing my son was being ridiculed, all I could do was look the other way. I can't remember how many times I shed tears alone because of how pathetic I felt. Soon enough, when my son Michael entered middle school, he started hanging out with delinquents. He would sleep over at friends' houses and hang out at some gas station's parking lot until late at night. Back in the day, cell phones weren't very common, and it was quite rare for a middle schooler to have one. Michael started coming home less and less, and I had no clue where he was or what he was doing. All I would do was apologize when I got calls from the school saying, There's been a complaint from a nearby gas station. Whenever I went to Michael's school, Michael and his rowdy classmates would call me names like good for nothing and bottom of the barrel, while throwing empty cans at me. Michael had become more violent since entering middle school, and I was scared to even talk to him, not knowing what he might do. I wish I had handled things better when he was still in elementary school, but what was the right way for a parent to deal with a child's bad behavior? I had no idea how to communicate with a teenager and was utterly baffled. He skipped school without a care and even ran away during classes. His grades were rock bottom. At a parent-teacher conference, they told me that there's a private high school where even Michael could get in, and I was relieved. I'm glad there was a high school he could go to. The environment and his classmates would all change, and I thought maybe he'd calm down a bit after going to high school. Just as I hoped, after starting high school, Michael began to take his classes seriously. He studied hard and started scoring a bit above average on tests. And he even made it to college. But his disdain for me remained the same even after going to high school. He continued to bounce from one friend's house to another, never stopping by home. After getting into college, he started living alone in a dorm, and he paid his tuition by working part-time. He was living independently, which was commendable, but he was cold as ice towards me. Even after he started working, he never once came home. Then, out of the blue, when Michael was about 25, which I hadn't seen in years, he called me. Out of the blue, he calls me and says, "I've got someone I want to marry." Then he goes, "Next Sunday at 2 p.m., we're meeting up at a fancy restaurant, so be there." And lets me know the plans he made without even asking about my availability. I'm like, "Hold on, this is too sudden." But when I got mad, he just goes, "If you can't make it, don't bother," and hangs up the phone with his cold attitude. Well, I had mixed feelings, but there's no denying he's my precious only son. So, for his sake, I went to the fancy restaurant at the time he told me to. When I got to the restaurant, her folks were already there, and they're like, "Who are you?" All rude, like out of nowhere. I'm like, "You call me out of the blue and then ask who? Come on." But even though I'm fuming, her folks just go, "Nah, we didn't call you," and they're just as cold as my son was. Now my son Michael, he's standing there smirking something fierce. This guy, he's up to something. Still not sure I trust what's happening, I head inside the restaurant. There's no talk about Michael or his partner Sarah. Instead, I was the center of their attention, who they had just treated like an intruder. Then Michael starts going off like, "This guy here, he dropped out of high school and worked, but after Mom passed, he's just been loafing around," telling Sarah and her folks. I'm like, "Hey, this ain't the time or place," but he isn't having any of it. Then, to top it all off, Sarah bursts out laughing. "For real? Can a person even get hired with just a middle school education?" And Sarah's dad is all, "Wow, raised by a high school dropout and layabout, but you are here with a college degree and a job at a big company. You took your old man as what not to be, huh?" Praising Michael. I was too tired to even argue and was gonna say what you want, I'm out of here. But the second I go to say that, a waiter comes in from behind me with the food. Sorry for the wait. Oh right, the food hadn't even come yet. I was so steamed I forgot. I tried to calm down, thought I'd just eat what was in front of me and leave. But the food that gets brought out is only for Michael, Sarah, and Sarah's parents. The waiter goes, "I'm sorry, we had a reservation for 4, giving me this look. Sarah's mom goes, "Yes, that's correct. He's not our family, so don't mind him," giving the waiter this sweet smile. The waiter, looking all kinds of uncomfortable, nods and backs out. Just as I'm about to lose it, Sarah's dad cuts me off. He goes, "We don't want anything to do with some deadbeat high school dropout. Our family and relatives are all bank employees, doctors, working at major companies. You don't belong here, please leave." That was enough, I said. "Is education and job history all you care about? Aren't you folks a bit off your rockers?" And got up to leave. And to that, Sarah's dad says, "I work at Bank of America, where education and job history really matter for clients' trust. But of course, a layabout like you wouldn't know." "Oh my, you work at Bank of America, huh? That's quite impressive." I said that as I was leaving, but they didn't hear me. The next day, I paid a visit to Bank of America, where Sarah's dad works. Being a man who's been called a deadbeat by my son, his classmates, and my son's fiancée and her family, I must admit I'm not actually a deadbeat. After my wife passed away, I temporarily closed down the real estate business I was running. But let me clarify, it was just a temporary closure. I didn't shut it down for good. After my wife's passing, I switched my business to online management so I could prioritize my son's school events and PTA meetings. When I had a physical store, most of my clients were neighbors. But after switching to online management, I could serve customers from all over the country. Like people living in small towns that are about an hour's drive from the nearest train station, and also American folks living abroad. I started getting more consultations about renting and buying properties from these folks. Thanks to the internet, I could expand my property portfolio and cater to a broader clientele. Running a real estate business online made things possible that seems like a dream. Additionally, I was quite active in stocks and investments as a hobby. Currently, I have $50 million deposited in Bank of America, where Sarah's dad works. Upon arriving at the bank, I promptly requested to speak with the branch manager and informed everything that happened the day before. I was told by one of your employees that this bank operates on trust built on educational background and work history. So I've lost all trust in this bank because of that statement. Could you please proceed with the account closure? As I said that, the branch manager kept apologizing profusely and finally explained the account closure process with a face on the verge of tears. Oh, I almost forgot about something important. There's this troublemaker who has not paid the rent for the apartment I own for 2 years. I had been letting it slide thinking he's my son, but no more. I mailed my son a notice demanding 2 years' worth of rent. 3 days later, Sarah's dad and my bonehead son came storming into my house. Why did you rat me out to the branch manager? That was underhanded. Dad, what's the deal with that notice? If you're the manager, cover for me. I sighed and said, I lost trust in the bank after learning about your practice of judging clients based on education and work history. Are you panicking just because of what one person said? Do you have something to hide? And Michael, just because we're family doesn't mean you can skip paying rent. Pay your own dang rent. Sarah's dad shouted, Because you went around stirring the pot, I got a bunch of complaints from my other clients. My boss chewed me out because of what you did. The nerve! Oh no, I didn't stir the pot. I just shared the story as a casual conversation with my relatives and clients. I didn't tell them to close their accounts. As I said that with a smile, my son snapped at me. What clients, Dad? You're just a deadbeat, aren't you? You think a deadbeat could afford to build a huge house like this in such a prime location and still maintain this lifestyle? I even did some renovations recently. As I replied, my son made a baffled face and said, Huh? What's that? Did you go into debt or something? I'm really fed up with you. I took a break from my real estate job for a while and then switched to running an online business, which I'm still doing. How many times do I have to tell you I'm not a bum? With my words, my son turned pale as a ghost. What? I had no clue. I thought you were just working part-time. Sarah's dad started yelling. You're a real piece of work, keeping your occupation secret, even from your own son. I got annoyed and said, Say whatever you want, as I closed the front door. Outside I heard them shouting, You've ruined my reputation. I'm gonna sue you. I can't believe I've been duped by my old man for this long. I'm not gonna let him do this to me. The two of them were making a ruckus. But after about 10 minutes of shouting, seems like they got exhausted and it got quiet. Well, once they realized that shouting was meaningless, I figured they wouldn't bother coming around here again. I let out a sigh of relief and went to make myself a cup of coffee. Just then, I heard my son's voice outside again. You big fat liar! What? Are you still here? I said as I looked out the window to see Sarah's dad and my son spray painting my front door. You've got to be kidding me. What are they up to? Just as I was about to go outside and give them a piece of my mind, I heard a police siren getting closer. Could it be that someone in the neighborhood called the cops? My hunch was right on the money. When I went outside, the two of them were being detained by the police, who showed up because of a neighbor's complaint. Ah, there he is, that big fat liar. I lost all my credibility at work because of him. As they shouted, the police calmly loaded them into the patrol car, saying, All right, we'll take it from here. Then one of the officers, who seemed to have just noticed me, approached me with a strangely cheerful expression. Sir, would you please come with us to give your statement? Why me? But I guess I'm the victim here. I'm gonna spill the beans on all their shenanigans. When we got to the police station, I showed the cops a video from my phone. It was footage from the security camera I installed at my front door. The camera had recorded all their yelling and antics. What a great piece of evidence, the officer exclaimed with a sparkle in his eye, and my questioning was over in a jiffy. My son and Sarah's dad were given a stern warning by the police, and they had to sign a restraining order to keep their distance from me. And it turns out the whole neighborhood had witnessed their crazy behavior. One of my son's coworkers who lives nearby had been blabbering about it at the office. "Hey, you won't believe it, but Michael was caught spray painting his own father's house and got hauled off by the cops. I was so shocked, I recorded the whole thing." My son became the talk of the town at his workplace and with clients, and his boss ended up demoting him. I went to report the incident to Bank of America again, where Sarah's dad worked. When I showed the manager the security camera footage on my phone, his face turned white as a sheet. I heard that Sarah's dad finally got fired, and naturally, she called off the engagement with Michael. Michael and Sarah's family both fled far away to a rural area. Apparently, Sarah's parents even came to work part-time at the gas station in the sticks, run by my brother. "They're no good. Couldn't get the hang of stocking shelves no matter how many times I showed them. Had to give them the boot pronto. And word has it, the nearby gas stations and farmers did the same." According to my brother, it seems Sarah's parents can't land a steady job, and they're bouncing from one gig to another at gas stations and farms as a couple. Furthermore, I heard that Sarah showered her boyfriends, including my son, with high-end gifts like watches, and she was in debt because of that. The little money her parents make from their part-time jobs apparently goes straight into paying off their daughter's debts, and it's a mystery how they're making ends meet. It's been 5 years since then, and my son is now 30. It seems like he's changed for the better, after being treated with kindness from folks in the small town he moved to. He came to me a couple of times and apologized sincerely. "I was naive and immature. I didn't even try to understand your job and just labeled you as a good-for-nothing. I can't apologize enough for how much I regret it." Seeing the change in my son's attitude, I decided to let him move in with me. Now he's working at a company near my place, and little by little, he's helping me out with my work too. But don't get me wrong, he's still wet behind the ears, and I don't trust him completely. I'm hesitant to hand over all my work to him, but I'm going to observe his behavior and attitude towards work and make decisions accordingly. If he proves he's really turned his life around, I might consider handing over the reins of my business. But if I told him that, he might get too excited and say, "For real? I'll hand in my 2 weeks' notice tomorrow," and do something impulsive. I'm living with my son, holding on to the hope that one day I'll feel confident enough to trust him with everything.